So, this year I decided to document every video game I played, while at the same time going out of my way to play as many as possible, whether it be new or old. I decided to revisit some games I played in the past, but that's not what I'll be talking about today. Games that are brand new to me this year are what qualify for this list. So, I want to clarify that even if a game didn't release this year, it can still make the list, but the majority of the list does contain 2022 releases. I played around 50 to 60 games this year, some really good and some VR chat. I also want to go ahead and say now I have not played many of the heavy hitters this year. No Elden Ring and no God of War. I do intend to play these games at some point, but I didn't get around to it this year. I can also almost guarantee this list will differ heavily from a lot of other people's lists, so bear with my specific taste. If you are not a fan of JRPGs, you will probably not care about this list. This video will contain spoilers for some games, and I will make sure to point out when I delve into spoiler territory, so do not worry. This video is also really long, as you've probably noticed. I plan on talking about a game for as long as I need to, depending on how much I have to say about it, regardless of placement. So get some hot Cheetos or something and relax. This was a fun project to work on throughout the year, and this video will be a culmination of everything I've been working towards since the beginning of the year. So I hope you all enjoy it. Two things I have a big passion for are cartoons and Super Smash Bros. So back in 2021, when Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl got announced, I lost my shit. Cartoon characters that I grew up with and still watch to this day in a game styled like one of my favorite game series of all time was pretty hard to completely mess up. Unfortunately, the game wasn't really able to get its foot off the ground, which is a shame as I really enjoyed my time with it. And from a competitive standpoint, it's an A in my book. But due to a lack of content on top of a $50 price tag, the game failed in the eyes of many. But hey, just the novelty of a Nickelodeon Smash was sick to me, and it was always an idea I had for a game in my head. Now on the other side of the coin. Shortly after the release of NASB, a leaked image was going around of a Warner Bros. Themed platform fighter featuring IPs like Adventure Time, DC, and Rick and Morty. If you take a look at my channel for about 5 seconds, you can see that I'm a huge fan of Cartoon Network, so this was very interesting to me. Now obviously this game is so much more than Cartoon Network, with only 2 original shows even being repped in the game as of right now. But nonetheless, a free-to-play competitive focused platform fighter with iconic characters from WB's lineup is something pretty hard to pass on for most people. The main thing that piqued my interest with this game was the fact that it was focused primarily on 2v2 rather than the traditional 1v1. I am a big fan of team-based multiplayer games, and we will definitely be talking about that again later. But in general, I feel as if I work better with others than I do by myself. The doubles format helps the game feel fresh and stand out against other games of the genre. Doubles are usually set aside for side events with other platform fighters, so to see it being the focus is really cool. The only problem with this format is that it makes solo queuing hell, as you have no idea what your partner is going to play like. 2v2 isn't really a common format in competitive games, so you usually have a whole team where at least one player will hold their weight. I've had pretty good luck with who I'm paired up with, but sometimes you'll get a partner that will sell you like a bag of chips at 7-Eleven. The game is obviously more enjoyable with friends, so that shouldn't really be an issue, assuming you have friends. The game is very beginner-friendly and easy to get into, which is exactly what one would want out of a free-to-play game. As far as free-to-play games go, it's among one of the best in my opinion. Obviously there are in-game purchases, and yes, it will take you a long time to unlock every character if you don't intend on dropping some bread, but it's free to play for a reason. And everything like characters and perks are fully unlocked for offline play, so it's not really a big deal. And speaking of characters, one thing I must commend the devs for is how fast the character rollout has been. The game was released back in July, and since then we've gotten 7 new playable characters. I'm not fully sure what goes into making and releasing these characters, but from an outside perspective it's pretty damn impressive. There's so much more I can talk about, like how fun and hyped this game is to watch at a competitive level, and how often we get patches with, opinions on the latter varying depending on the person. But I have way more games to talk about. I will add that this game did in fact win Best Fighting Game of the Year at the Game Awards, which I don't think the competition was that steep to begin with, but it did beat the staple King of Fighters series and JoJo's, so that has to count for something. Multiversus is a fun game that I pick up and play with friends from time to time, and I'm interested to see where they go from here. They did say they were open to adding characters outside of Warner, so only time will tell. Some more Cartoon Network characters would be dope though. A series that's been catching my attention lately is the ever so popular Final Fantasy franchise. Although it's been around for decades at this point, I haven't really gotten into it until very recently. although I have been playing Kingdom Hearts for a while, and I have been aware of the series' plethora of iconic characters since I was a wee lad. It wasn't until our current decade of the 2022s that I decided to dip my foot into the series. Now, I did purchase and play a bit of Final Fantasy VII back in 2017 on the PS4, but it didn't really hook me. Fast forward to the 2020s, and I ended up playing the game beginning to end, and it ended up being a contender for my favorite game of all time. I am also a fan of Final Fantasy VII Remake, which made me want to play the original game in the first place. And that was pretty much it before the current year of 2022. Before I even gave a shit about the Final Fantasy series, the Final Fantasy VII series, I dabbled a bit with Final Fantasy XIV, the second MMO in the series. MMOs as a genre have always seemed very interesting to me, as the concept of an entire game being fully online and multiplayer always sounded cool to me.
You've been on your computer all weekend. Shouldn't you go out and socialize with your friends?
I am socializing, Artard. I'm logged on to an MMORPG with people from all over the world and getting XP with my party using TeamSpeak.
I'm not an artard.
A couple friends of mine and other YouTubers I watched played the game religiously, so I decided to see what was up, and it was alright. I played with a friend who basically just watched me do the opening bit of the game, and it was whatever, honestly. I did enjoy the basic novelty of being able to play the game with my friend watching me play said game within said game, but I didn't get far at all and dropped it pretty fast. Fast forward to 2022, and I decided to give the game another shot, as a big theme with the games I played this year being recommendations from friends. Said friend from my first time with the game said that the recent expansion, Endwalker, basically cemented the game as her favorite of all time. I was interested and wanted a new game to play with another friend. Said friend spawns in game once and never touches it again. And since this was after I played the FF7 games, I thought it was time to play my second numbered entry in the series. I have a lot more to say about this game than others on the list, so be prepared. Final Fantasy XIV currently has 4 expansions on top of the base game. For my playthrough of this game, I decided to just stick with the base game, as I had a lot more games to play and didn't want to play what are essentially 5 whole MMORPG campaigns back to back. I will get to them at some point, but for now I'll be talking about my experience with the base game. And before I talk about that, a history lesson. The version of Final Fantasy XIV that I played is labeled as A Realm Reborn. It's probably just a cool subtitle they added to the game for no reason, right?
Right? Wrong!
A Realm Reborn is actually a completely separate game from the original Final Fantasy XIV, which released in 2010. Long story short, the game was ballsack garbage. The game had little to no polish and just lacked very basic quality of life features such as a faster travel method, no ease of access with hotbars, etc., etc. Basically an unfinished game. And from what I know about the main entries in the series, Final Fantasy fans were fucking starving, man. I'm sure Final Fantasy 11, 12, and 13 were alright games in their own right, but the series used to be a behemoth. These specific games being regarded as some of the best RPGs ever made. In the words of the, at the time, CEO of Square Enix, Yoichi Wada, the Final Fantasy brand had been greatly damaged. Like Jesus Christ, dude. So basically they fucked up so bad that they had to make an entirely new game. But the coolest thing to come from this was that at the end of the original game's lifespan, they basically decided to nuke the entire world that existed within the original release of the game. Said nuke, or meteor rather, was visible throughout the final days of the original game. It must have been so cool to be around for that to happen, and it does in fact connect to the story of A Realm Reborn, which takes place 5 years after the original game. And speaking of the story, let's finally talk about my experience with the game. So, first of all, I gotta say the story in this game was pretty underwhelming, not gonna lie. Honest to God, I don't remember much of what happens in this game. Sorry, but the story was just that boring to me. I remember delivering pretzels in the beginning of the game and doing some wine bullshit at some point, but I cannot recall any super memorable moments other than the last bit of the game, where you have to rescue and team up with the cast to stop the main enemy. Sounds really basic, like literally the most generic final act in any RPG ever, but it was honestly my favorite part of the story, and I genuinely liked it due to the characters, which are actually pretty likable. I know the expansions have what are apparently some of the best stories in the series, so we'll have to wait and see. As an MMO, you basically go around killing enemies, fighting bosses, and doing quests, and holy shit, there are a lot of quests in this game. I'm not even talking about side quests either, which are probably the most mundane and useless quest in any game ever, but they're obviously not mandatory, so it's not a big deal. The main quests, which are the main focus of the game, are so abundant throughout the game, and a decent chunk of them might as well be side quests, I won't lie. Hell, I technically haven't even done all the quests as there is a post-game with other stuff to do before the next expansion begins, but I'm saving those for when I inevitably play Heavensward. But by far my favorite part of the game is the dungeons and bosses of the game, the main multiplayer parts. As I said in the Multiversus segment, multiplayer is how you sell me on a game. Going through dungeons with other people was honestly so fun to me, and they only get more abundant with the expansions, so I'm excited for that. For this playthrough, I played as a tank, and my job was to basically soak up all the damage, that way my teammates can get their respective jobs done as well. Speaking of damage, the combat in this game is more fun than I expected it to be. Once you learn about comboing skills and how aggro and stuff like that works, it's pretty cool. Even as a tank who just basically baits enemies and changes position from time to time, it was pretty fun to me. Again, working off other people is my strong suit, so having a game focused on that is really cool. The coolest part about that is that a random I found once decided to just chill with me and kill frogs for a bit. He taught me how the enemy AoE field mechanic worked, with not being in the orange field being enough for me to understand, but also the fact you only have to not be in the field while the orange effect is active. As soon as it's gone, you can go right back to railing the enemy, even if you return to where the orange field originally was. This may seem obvious to most people I know, but the fact that a random went out of their way to add me and teach me basic shit about the game, a game so big that it was almost impossible to even log in with the release of the Endwalker expansion. Like that's how many niggas play this game. And this dude wanted to help me. So we chilled a bit, cruised a bit, it was fun. I never talked to him again after that, but it was still a cool interaction. And I had interactions with others as well, but it was mostly people patting me on the head since I was a Lalafell, the dwarf-like species in the game. Still funny interactions nonetheless. And that's the beauty of MMOs, being in a massive world with all these people all doing their own thing. A world within our world. I know I've barely scraped the surface of this game, both in this video and just in general. I didn't mention other stuff like other classes, the other mission variants, the Gold Saucer, which is really damn cool that it's in this game. And on that note, the ridiculous amount of references in this game. Being what is essentially the biggest game in the series, of course it has references to other games in the series, and even other series altogether, like Yokai Watch, Nier, and Monster Hunter. Unfortunately, these are references I cannot appreciate as much as others due to 7 being the only other game I played, but hey, the Gold Saucer is sick, at least. I will get to the other expansions at some point. There's a very big chance you will see this game again on next year's iteration of this list, assuming I do this again, of course. One last big shout out to my friend Sam who walked me through the game and how it works and stuff. The one guy taught me how AoEs work, but Sam taught me about literally everything else, and her being the one to even put me on the game in the first place. I did make sure to have her along for most of the multiplayer content, and it only made the experience all the much better. Maybe someday I can get some other friends into the game and we just have a bunch of goons running around rolling up in Cactar doing raids and shit. Story was mid, Sam, I'm gonna be honest, but the experience made up for it. So, now from one friend recommended game to another. Binding of Isaac is a roguelike indie game developed by Edmund McMillan and Florian Hemsel, the former known for his work on Super Meat Boy, which is a game I am a fan of. The only experiences with a roguelike style game is the Pokemon Mystery Dungeon series, which I have played a shit ton back in my childhood. Other than that, I am completely new to the more traditional style of these kind of games. Binding of Isaac was originally released back in 2011, and from what I can tell, the game was pretty alright. Nothing crazy. I know some people weren't really a fan of keyboard controls with this game, which I fully understand. Funnily enough though, back in high school while riding the bus to and from school, there were these two kids who would play Isaac every day on their Chromebooks. This did not change my opinion on the game at all though, seeing how the game would frequently lag as, you know, they were on Chromebooks. In 2014, the game was remade into Binding of Isaac Rebirth and was put onto basically every console out at the time, including the 3DS and Vita. It has since gone on to become one of the best games in its genre. I have a bunch of friends who are big fans of this game, one of them being my good friend Swegwin, who recommended that while I'm on the search for new games to try, that I give Isaac a shot.
I'm Swegwin.
He even supplied me with the current version of the game, Binding of Isaac Repentance. First things first, this game is definitely worth the praise it gets, and I can fully see why people like this game a whole lot. I even have a friend who hadn't even played the game before, but watches so much of the game that when I got him to play the co-op mode with me, he knew more shit about the game than me. And I've been playing this game since January. Yeah. That being said, I do not play this game nearly as much as others do, like at all. I haven't even seen about 75% of what this game has to offer, which is why it isn't any higher on the list. Roguelikes are games that seemingly have no end. You kinda just keep playing them over and over again to see how far you can get, or to see what kind of broken, wacky, or just fun equipment you can get. Now obviously I am a fan of this game, otherwise it wouldn't be number 8 on this list. But I'm the type of person that kinda needs an objective to do or just feel lost. I'm also a casual fan of Animal Crossing in this sense, but that's it, just casual. Same with Isaac. That's why games like Pokemon Mystery Dungeon appeal to me more, as there is a story/goal for me to work towards. But that doesn't mean Isaac doesn't have a goal, not in the slightest. Now, funnily enough, after writing this part of the script, I've gotten addicted to a new Pokemon ROM hack titled Emerald Rogue, which is a take on Pokemon in a traditional roguelike setting. Kind of ironic, it's really fucking good. Isaac has over 600 achievements, by far the most I've seen in any game ever. I don't even think I've seen games with more than like 100. Shit's insane. I was glad to see that the game controls amazingly with a controller. The dual stick way of moving and aiming is very simple and works perfectly. I'm not gonna go in depth on how roguelikes work. You basically have randomly generated maps and randomly generated rooms, items, enemies, bosses, etc. You slowly build yourself up to become a killing machine, and that's the gist of it. Binding of Isaac is actually loosely based off of a biblical story of the same name. In the game version of the story, Isaac lives with his mother, and one day, God tells her to sacrifice her son to prove her loyalty to him. Isaac hears about this and jumps through a trap door, and that's how the game starts! The game does have a lot of religious references, most of which go over my head, but it doesn't take away from the experience whatsoever. Also, apparently in the original version of the story, it was Isaac's dad who was told to sacrifice his son to prove his loyalty to God. He actually goes through with it, and God is like, "Hey man, you weren't actually supposed to do it, you moron, there was a test." Which is hilarious. Okay, so I'm actually dumb, that's not how the story goes. Right before the dad is about to kill Isaac, God tells him no, he doesn't actually kill him. But I like my version more, so Isaac goes through dungeons collecting upgrades and beating bosses and such. There are secrets until he comes... The fuck? He does this until he comes face to face with Mom. Upon defeating her, the game is over. In the original. Upon defeating her in another run, you unlock the Womb. And at the end of that area, you have to face Mom's heart. From there, you beat the heart a bunch and unlock even more areas to explore, like Shoal and Cathedral. And that is basically all I can say. Like I said, I have not played this game enough to make it past whatever is next. There are also very few games that I can play for an elongated amount of time without wanting to do something else. And let me tell you, if I'm having a dog shit run of this game, that I managed to make it really far in, just to lose to a bullet hell section with half a heart, I'm turning the game off. That being said, I still plan on playing the game from time to time. It is a really fun game, and once I get a rhythm going, I feel unstoppable. I didn't get to touch on some other mechanics in the game, and that's mostly because I don't even really know how they work, and I don't want to pretend like I know what I'm talking about. I'm definitely more open to playing other roguelikes now that I dip my toe in the pool of the genre. Big shout out to my boy Sweglin for getting me into the game, buying me the DLC, and just teaching me literally everything about it. Although, this isn't the last time Sweglin will be brought up during this list. Okay, so, next up we have a pretty controversial pick, so I'm gonna just get right into it. Overwatch 2 is the, sequel to the original 2016 FPS. Right off the bat, I want to express to you all that Overwatch 1 is one of my favorite games of all time, and by far my favorite shooter. I played the game all the time back in high school, and even occasionally after high school. The wide cast of characters and playstyles was so interesting to me, and once again, multiplayer games are my shit. Playing this game with my family and friends constantly never got old, and even though I wasn't the best at the game, it didn't matter because I was still having fun all the way through. I loved this game so much that I bought it 3 times. Originally on PS4, second time on PC, and third on the Switch. This was before crossplay was a thing, and I still had many fond memories with each version of the game with different people. In 2019, Overwatch 2 was announced to a resounding...
Okay.
To be blunt, nobody gave a fuck, including me, especially because the game is almost one-to-one with the original in terms of core gameplay. The one big selling point of Overwatch 2 was that they were finally going to add a campaign mode to the game. Overwatch has an amazing cast of characters coming from all different areas of the world with their own backstories and reasonings for being with or against the group organization known as Overwatch. A lot of the Overwatch lore is only told through subtext, animated shorts, and comics. A campaign could finally paint a better picture of the events that took place before the game, and could even continue the lore past what we know already. Too bad it's not even in the game yet! Alright, before I explain why I actually like this game and why it's above games that most people would argue are without a doubt better, and I agree, they are. Let's get into the many wrongs of Overwatch 2. Leading up to the game's launch, Overwatch dwindled in popularity, with many people clowning on it constantly. Said people still played the game when it came out, of course, but that's probably partially due to the fact that the game is free to play now. This is good and bad. With the game being free, Blizzard has to make money somehow, and with the loot boxes from the first game gone, the only way to get cosmetics now is through a shop and a battle pass system. The shop sucks! Spending so much money on skins that shouldn't even warrant a price tag for how lame some of them are. Loot boxes weren't perfect, but I got a lot of shit through my time with Overwatch 1 without spending a penny. And thank God I was able to transfer between games, or else I honestly probably wouldn't even play this game. With my old legendary skins from when I played the game years ago, I think I'm all set on cosmetics. Not like any of the new ones have even remotely caught my eye to begin with. The other way to earn rewards is through the Battle Pass system, which is a practice that I'm pretty indifferent on. Spending a smaller amount of money for a great number of cosmetics that you slowly earn by playing the game is an interesting way to go about it. Of course, you don't have to pay for the Battle Pass, but then you miss out on stuff like, oh, I don't know, nothing important, just entirely new characters. Now, this didn't bother me as, again, the game is free to play, and I have a shit ton of cosmetics from the first game, so I might as well drop some money, as I know I'm going to play the shit out of this game. And I sure did. Characters aren't really locked by the Battle Pass at all. You just have to play a lot of the game if you don't intend on dropping money. Speaking of which, it probably doesn't even matter, but the removal of level ups is kinda lame. The only sense of progression through the game is the Battle Pass system, and that's not really the same thing. There were some other questionable changes at the main meta switching from 6v6 to 5v5. I don't really follow competitive Overwatch, so this doesn't bug me that much, but the game focusing on one take now definitely switches things up immensely for better or for worse. This game also suffered from what was possibly one of the worst launches for any game in history. Being unable to log in, people losing their characters randomly, the transfer system not functioning properly. So this game sounds like complete trash and a stray from the Game of the Year 2016 winner, Overwatch 1. Why the fuck is it number 7 on this list then? At its core, Overwatch is Overwatch. Had Overwatch 1 dropped this year, it would have for sure been number 1. So it does say a lot that the sequel is this low. Even through all the bullshit this game has, it's still Overwatch. Some of the most fun I've had with my family and friends this year was grouping up with the boys and watching other teams. For a small moment, I even wanted to take this game to a serious level in competitive play. My excitement with the game has definitely died down since launch, but I still plan on playing it throughout the coming months. Hell, maybe even years. At the end of the day, the multiplayer aspect of the game, which is the only aspect of the game at the moment, is really damn solid. Despite this game coming out during the last quarter of the year, it's still probably one of my most played games of the year. It does suck that both Overwatch and Blizzard are a shell of what they were back in 2016, and in more ways than one. But at least I can still find a lot of enjoyment in my most played game during my high school years. Alright, let's talk about Pokemon. Pokemon in recent years has become a touchy topic when it comes to the quality of games and criticism of said games. As a diehard fan of this series since I was about 7 years old, I have witnessed the growth of the series, the highs and the lows. 2017 saw the release of Nintendo's current console, the Switch. 2017 also saw the release of the final handheld Pokemon game, Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. This was in the middle of Generation 7, and all things considered, I thought Sun and Moon were really good games, and Ultra Sun and Moon, they're eh. It was only a matter of time before the series finally moved to the big screen as the Nintendo Switch served as the replacement for both the Wii U and the 3DS. Worlds were starting to collide. 2018 we finally got our first home console Pokemon game. A remake of Gen 1. Again. And I liked it. At the time, it was without a doubt the most lackluster Pokemon game, but for what it is, Gen 1 with modern mechanics, it was pretty decent. Not the best in the series, not even close, but it served its purpose. The following year, we finally got Generation 8, Sword and Shield, and I did not like it. Look, Pokemon is Pokemon. I'm a firm believer that there can't really be a bad Pokemon game. Every Pokemon game is someone's first Pokemon game, and as long as you're catching, battling, trading, whatever, it'll be an okay game. And I'd be lying if I said I didn't enjoy Sword and Shield when it first released. But the lackluster visuals, lack of an interesting story, and yes, the lack of a national dex did turn me off a bit. Which would be fine if they didn't say they cut Pokemon to focus on the quality of the game. Like, shut up, man. The game received DLC, which was probably the most bored I have ever been playing a Pokemon game. I literally fell asleep playing Crown Tundra, dude. In 2021, we got the next iteration in the main series, Diamond and Pearl remakes, which, from what I can tell, are unanimously agreed to be a contender for weakest game in the franchise. Which sucks, dude. The OG Diamond and Pearl were the newest games at the time I got into the series, so it was the generation I grew up with. Everyone has that one gen they grew up with from beginning to end, and this was mine. I literally felt nothing playing this game. It was a slog, honestly. I can go on and on about it, but let's just say that this was probably the most nothing game I've ever played. But in 2022, we received not one, but 2 new main series Pokemon games. Yes, main series. You may be wondering why I just went on a Switch Pokemon game history lesson. Well, that's because we have a dilemma on our hands. You see, Legends Arceus and Scarlet Violet are 2 pretty different games when it comes to Pokemon. Legends Arceus is the most dramatically different game in the series, being more action-oriented and focusing more on catching Pokemon and exploring the world. Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl were pretty shitty remakes, but at least we got an interesting prequel, and a pretty damn good one too. Legends Arceus, in my opinion, was the first truly great Pokemon game on the Switch. A new interesting formula mixed in with an actual decent looking game for once, on top of more story and lore to add onto the Hisui/Sinnoh region. I really like that your trainer actually feels like a character in this game. Not like a well written one or whatever, but the fact that you have what is essentially a health bar, since, you yourself can faint to Pokemon now. In a way, it feels like your character is more important than your Pokemon in this game. At least that's how I saw it, and I really liked it. The game was a really good time when it first released, and it was released at the perfect time, in fact. The game was released on January 28th, 2022, and around that time there was actually a multi-day snowstorm where I live, so I was stuck in my room all day playing Legends Arceus and watching Netflix. It was a pretty great time. The only real issues I have with the game is that there are very little trainer battles, often being regulated to boss battles/important battles. The actual boss fights being the noble Pokemon, which are fights in which you, the trainer, have to scrap with the Pokemon yourself. Actual thinking in a Pokemon game caught me off guard, I won't lie. Especially in a post-game boss fight that is by far the hardest boss in the entire series, bar none. First time I was caught mauling in a Pokemon game since I was a kid. Insane shit. And good shit to Game Freak for single-handedly redeeming Generation 8 in my eyes. Now, on the other side of the coin, we received Generation 9 this year with the release of the newest games, Scarlet and Violet. I will say, having 3 Pokemon games within the span of basically a year was a bit much in my opinion, and I would have much rather waited until 2023 for these games to be released, and maybe that should have been the move. Yes, I know Pokemon games can't really be delayed as they're on a constant tight schedule with needing everything to be released at a certain time to match up with the other mediums of the franchise, like the trading card game, anime, merch, etc. Scarlet and Violet have some of, if not the worst performance issues in any Nintendo game I think I've ever seen. It's really laughable. It's pretty unreal. Like, this is the most profitable franchise in the world, and they have animations like this. Wild. Now let's ignore the performance issues for a minute and look at what the rest of the game has to offer. If we do that, then we have what I genuinely believe to be the best Pokemon game since the DS era games. I'm dead serious. Legends Arceus dabbled with the open world concept in a Pokemon game by having open zones. Multiple big maps within the game that are standalone and are not connected to each other. Scarlet and Violet take this to the next level by having a fully open world map where you can do whatever you want, in whatever order you want, much like Breath of the Wild. Exploring the world on your respective legendary and seeing how far Pokemon has actually come was really cool to see, barring the performance issues, of course. This is literally what I've been wanting in a Pokemon game since I was a kid. Unfortunately, another big part of the game I have an issue with is the open world aspect, because while you can do anything you want in any order you want, it's not really recommended as the trainers and bosses do not scale with the levels of your team. So it is supposed to be the first gym, the bug type gym, I didn't do till near the end of the game, which just resulted in me mashing moves against these stupid baby Pokemon as it doesn't matter how I battle during this point in the game. And while there are things to do such as fighting Titans and Team Star members, they're pretty lackluster too, all things considered. No ideas that I appreciate, but pretty I'm a big fan of a lot of the new Pokemon in this game, like Tinkaton and Annihilate. And as always, the music is fire, which isn't surprising when you have Toby Fox on the music team. The story in this game is also pretty damn good. Spoilers for Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. The narrative is split into 3 separate stories. The normal gym challenge, which is classic Pokemon. The Team Star villain story, which was definitely the weakest. The twist was pretty obvious for most people, and if you didn't know the true identity of Cassiopeia, then you probably still weren't wowed at all. Then there's a Titan storyline. No, the Arven storyline. For some reason, Pokemon love stories of characters with fucked up childhoods, and this game is no different. Like, it's Pokemon, so the story will never be anything too crazy, but this is the closest we got to a dark Pokemon game in terms of emotional value, if you know what I mean. Another thing to add is that the new Terrasilize mechanic is both interesting and really annoying at the same time. The gimmick is that any Pokemon can now become any type with the right tools, such as raids, wild encounters, and collecting Terra Shards, which is the most grind-heavy bullshit I've ever had to do in a Pokemon game. As a competitive battler, it's really dumb that I have to just guess or assume what Terra type another player has, but when I Terrasilize and mix my opponent up with it, I feel like a fucking genius. I had a lot more to say about this game compared to Legends Arceus since it's still very fresh in my mind, but this leads us to the final verdict. I really only want to have one Pokemon game on this list as I'm a fan of the one game per series rule when it comes to top 10s. So which one is it gonna be? It's really close, like really fucking close. Like these 2 games are pretty even if I'm being completely honest. And if I had to choose one, I'm picking Legends Arceus. Overall, I think Legends Arceus is a more put together and polished game. Like just overall the better game. But Scarlet and Violet are definitely the better Pokemon game, if that makes any sense. I want to see more games styled like Legends in the future. The possibilities are endless. Imagine a Legends Celebi where you explore Johto in the past and you witness the legendary beast being reborn. Or a Legends Kyurem where you get to see the original dragon that Reshiram and Zekrom once were. The series can actually world build so much better now that this is a thing, and I hope they stick with it. As a fan of the series, I'm glad to see Pokemon building its way back up to what it used to be. These two games aren't perfect, but they sure as hell are a step in the right direction. Now if you know me, you may be surprised to see Pokemon outside of the top 5. The next 5 games I really think everyone should all try at some point. They all do certain things really well and were definitely the highlights this year for me. So Pokemon started the year off by delivering a fresh experience to one of my favorite series growing up. 2 months later, Nintendo would release another game that would also change the formula to another one of its long-running series. A series I am also very fond of and have been playing since I was pretty much a baby. Kirby and the Forgotten Land. Kirby is, in my opinion, the most consistent series Nintendo has. Whether you think the games are good or bad, you cannot deny the quality of the games haven't really dwindled over the years. When you bought a Kirby game, you knew what you were getting, and in my opinion, there isn't a truly bad Kirby game. Some may be lackluster or a little bland, but none of them bad. The last major release was Star Allies back in 2018, and I personally thought it was just alright. Definitely the closest Kirby has gotten to a purely mediocre game, but not a bad game at all, especially not after the loads of content that the game received afterwards. After a game like this, many fans wondered what was next for the series. I feel like it was almost unanimously agreed within the minds of Kirby fans that now is the perfect time for a 3D entry in the series. Series like Mario and Zelda got their first 3D installments back on the N64. Kirby, however, would have to wait 4 whole console generations before getting this treatment. The closest we've gotten to this was Kirby Air Ride on the GameCube, which was a racing game that allowed you to roam freely on foot during its city trial mode, and Kirby's Blowout Blast on the 3DS, which was more of an action kind of game where you defeat waves of enemies by doing what Kirby does best. The game was an upgrade of a sub-game in Planet Robobot by the name of Kirby 3D Rumble. The game felt more like a proof of concept more than anything else for what a 3D Kirby could be, and that's what we finally got this year. Forgotten Land functions a lot more like Super Mario 3D World than Super Mario 64 in terms of 3D platformers. You go around level to level killing enemies and making it to the goal while trying to find collectibles along the way. Basically Kirby in 3D. The collectibles, however, are a part of the game that I have to commend though for not being piss easy like they usually have been in the past installments. Collectibles aren't the right word really, more like objectives. I don't know if I'm just used to how they used to be or if I'm just really fucking dumb, but a lot of these had me stumped for a long time. Take the first level, for example. This damn flower took me like 4 replays of the level to find. This one's probably on me, but for the literal first objective you're supposed to find in the game, this one got me good. This one on the bridge level, though. Like, come on. Still very cool nonetheless. Even though the game isn't open world or even open zone like Legends Arceus, the levels in this game are still pretty big in their own right. Every level feels very unique, and I swear there are some unique assets only used for some of these levels. There are 20 plus stages in this game, so that's pretty impressive, honestly. Another impressive aspect is how the combat works. The game has this weird optical illusion type effect where the hit detection depends on Kirby's position and camera. Kinda hard to explain, but this video shows it off pretty well. Kirby has always been an amazing beginner-friendly series, so to see the devs keep that mindset going into a 3D game is neat. I really like how copy abilities are handled in this game as well. There are only 12 abilities in this game, which is not a lot by the Kirby standard. That's less than half the amount in the first game with copy abilities. However, in this game you can actually upgrade each ability to have more utility. One of my favorites is definitely Needle, as when it's fully upgraded you can just roll around for a decently long period of time as long as you keep stabbing enemies. The obvious comparison is Katamari, which is another series I'm a big fan of, so more points to this ability for that. The main gimmick in this game is the Mouthful mode, where Kirby inhales real-world objects and uses them to traverse the world and solve puzzles. Honestly, I really don't care about these that much. The concept is kinda just to me. It's basically just the capture feature in Mario Odyssey, but in a Kirby game. Sometimes they do create interesting level concepts, but I was never super impressed. And while I'm bitching about this game, the one part of the game I'm not really a fan of was the post-game. You basically go through the combined versions of the previous levels looking for these soul collectibles. Reusing levels for the sake of content is nothing new to Kirby games, but if you miss just one of these, you'd have to replay 15 minutes worth of level just to find that one soul you missed. This wouldn't be that big of a problem if there was some sort of indicator of where they are or how many are in each room. The game does let you know if you got all the souls after you got them all, but I must have missed at least one per stage on my original playthrough because I deadass didn't see this message pop up until like the second one of these stages. Mostly a me problem, I suppose, but regardless, I didn't find these too much fun. The story is pretty standard for a Kirby story, honestly, but I do think it's funny that in the past decade we went from villains being bugs to robots to whatever the fuck Star Allies was cooking, to furries. Hearing actual voice acting in this game too caught me off guard as well.
Welcome visitors to the Dream Discoveries tour of our science facility, Lab Discovera.
Something Pokemon hopefully gets in the near future.
Is this nigga serious?
Side note, people might not really care for vocal tracks in games, but I'm glad most Nintendo properties nowadays are including them in their games. With Forgotten Land having one as well. In this game though, the song exists in the universe, which is sung by an unseen character with a name and everything. Kirby lore and subtext goes crazy. Honestly, upon beating this game, I obviously enjoyed it a lot, but I didn't think it was that special. Looking back on it, this could be a possible contender for best game in the series in my opinion. Great gameplay, music, and I haven't even touched on the visuals yet. In the common day where it seems a good handful of Switch games are held back visually by the hardware, it's always nice to see a game that looks this good. It is capped at 30 FPS, but at least the game's environments and sceneries make up for that. There's one game on this list that I'm sure pretty much everyone will enjoy. It's this one for sure. HAL stuck the landing perfectly with their first foray into the Z-Axis world. Let's see where we go from here. Has there ever been a game you've known about for a majority of your life that you've only heard nothing but great things about? A game you've been exposed to here and then? A game you've been meaning to play for the longest time but just never got around to it or had a reason to play it? Well, Swagman returns as shortly after I started playing Binding of Isaac, I began playing another one of his favorite games of all time. A game highly regarded as one of the best JRPGs of all time. I'm talking about Chrono Trigger. Chrono Trigger is a JRPG released for the Super Nintendo back in 1995 by Squaresoft, currently known today as Square Enix. Upon first glance, you may think this looks like the most generic looking JRPG ever, and I would agree with you. However, there is a reason for this. I like to look at this game as a culmination of what JRPGs were at the time. Like every JRPG before, this one led up to this single game. Why is that? Well, this game had probably one of the most legendary development teams in all of gaming. The game was designed by Final Fantasy creator Hironobu Sakaguchi, written by Dragon Quest creator Yuji Horii, and having character and settings designed by fucking Akira Toriyama of Dragon Ball fame. He also designs characters for Dragon Quest II. Even if you haven't been exposed to any of those IPs, you have to at least acknowledge how insane of a lineup that is for a game of this genre. That's like if you got Sam Raimi, the Russo brothers, and Christopher Nolan to make a superhero movie. With the help of some other all-stars in the industry, notably Nobuo Uematsu, the composer of numerous Final Fantasy games, and the composer of the Brawl main theme, which is very fitting now that I look back on it, the ultimate dream team got to it, and after finally playing it, it sure as hell did not disappoint. Though it may not seem like it at first glance, Chrono Trigger was very revolutionary at the time of its release, specifically pertaining to the story and how the game goes about presenting it. The game revolves around a group of characters who time travel across different time periods to prevent a global disaster from occurring. This explains why the main cast look the way they do. Designs from different time periods. I don't know why it had to take me to play this game to realize that, but yeah. The main parts of the story that were revolutionary at the time pertain to the immense amount of side quests that are actually somewhat plot related and help with character development, as well as the numerous endings this game holds. There's obviously a right way to go about playing the game and an obvious canon ending, but it's not uncommon for a newcomer of this game to go in blind and accidentally reach some of these endings. Some endings are also only accessible through New Game Plus, which, fun fact, this game actually coined that term. New Game Plus existed way before this game, but to my knowledge this is the first game to use the term. Like I said, very revolutionary. There are also parts of the game that change depending on what you do, and it could literally be the smallest thing. The butterfly effect is real in this game. I ate this person's sandwich thinking it would be a haha funny, like, dickhead thing to do, but no, it actually came back later on. It probably had no effect at all, but this whole courtroom scene had me rolling nonstop. It was so funny that Swagman strategically got me to do this random bullshit while I'm thinking it's just for goofs and gaffs. And yeah, it pretty much was. Still funny as shit though. To come clean for a minute, I have actually played Chrono Trigger before. Once I discovered the wonders of emulators during my middle school days, I would download every possible game I have heard of, even if I had no true desire to play it, just because I could. Chrono Trigger was one of these games. I messed around for 20 minutes, then never touched it again. It sucks, because I did intend on playing it again at some point. Just didn't think it'd take 10 years to get back into it. You're more than likely to have seen at least a few of this game's iconic main party. Despite not playing the game for so long, I still knew each and every party member since I was a kid pretty much. Hell, thanks to Super Smash Flash, I found out who Chrono and Cloud were simultaneously. I assumed they were both just as popular due to seeing them like that. That may not be true, but both are legendary in their own right. The music in this game is also legendary. You've definitely heard some songs in this game without even realizing it. Corridors of Time is a song beyond Chrono Trigger, a song most can listen to on loop without getting tired of it. Another thing that fans of this game commended for is the combat system. The game uses the active time battle system of combat, which means you may only attack once your attack gauge is filled. There's a constant flow of time through each and every battle, even when scrolling through menus. This threw me the fuck off during my short play session back when I was younger, but it does force the player to make smart decisions in battle and keep players on their toes. But by far the coolest part of the combat in this game are the techs, specifically the dual techs and triple techs. Techs are basically the magic attacks in this game, using MP and shit yada yada. The cool part is you can actually have characters combine their techs together to create these flashy, powerful moves. Seeing these moves in action for the first time is a sight to behold and is definitely the highlight of learning new moves and getting new party members. Going into this game, I expected the cast of characters to be just one-note standard RPG party members. But not at all. Each character subverted my expectations on what I actually thought they would be like. Luca, for example, definitely surprised me the most. I thought she would be just a generic childhood best friend character that would just join you out of obligation because we need more party members. But no. She actually has a pretty tragic backstory that got audible reactions out of me. God, I wish I had that shit recorded. It was so funny. Not to mention antagonist Magus, whose real identity is nothing but brilliant. And that's another reason I had such a fun time with this game. Experience the contents of a game with a friend who recommended it to you is like one of the funnest things you can do with a friend. Unlike FF14 and Binding of Isaac, every moment I had with Chrono Trigger was with Swigwin. Him seeing my reactions to every bit of this game must have been hella fun for him. By the end of the game, I felt fulfilled. At some point, I want to get to the other 90s RPGs just to see if they have the same lasting impact of this game. Hell, I'm currently playing through the successor to this game, Chrono Cross, and I'm having a pretty fun time with it. It's very different, which explains why you rarely hear about it, but it's very fascinating in its own way. Okay, so, edit in the script here. At the time of editing this part of the video, I have completed Chrono Cross, and it is definitely a masterpiece in its own right. Not as good as Trigger, but if you're curious, it wouldn't hurt to check it out. Had the one per franchise rule not exist, it would surely be on the lower half of this list. I highly recommend it, just make sure to play Chrono Trigger first. I feel like I touched on everything worth mentioning. If you're into JRPGs and you've been thinking about playing this game, but you just haven't yet for whatever reason, you should give it a try. You won't be disappointed.
I'm Swigwin.
Time to complete the trifecta of favorite game series finally changing the formula of their games. Sonic Frontiers.
I'm here, reaching far across these new frontiers. With my life, I fight this fear.
Much like Kirby and Pokemon before it, Sonic is a series that has been with me since I was a little kid. Starting with Sonic Adventure 2, I've been a big fan of the series, but not as hardcore as the vocal portion of the community. Sonic Frontiers is definitely the game that has exceeded my expectations the most this year. Other than the fact that this was an open world-like game, I literally gave no fucks. Didn't help that pre-release footage was very lacking in many departments. I was barely keeping up with news as I planned on buying the game anyway, but did not care too much of what was being shown at the time. I was optimistic, but cautiously optimistic. After playing it, I can safely say that Sonic Frontiers is easily the most fun I had with any game this year. This would be a good time to mention that this list isn't indicative on how good I think these games are. It's mostly how much I personally like them and my experiences with them. If this list was based on how good I genuinely think these games are in comparison to another, it'd look more like this. It is very apparent that people's opinions on this game change depending on whether you're a Sonic fan or not. The game to non-Sonic fans is realistically like a 5 to 7 out of 10 depending on the person. I personally was having so much fun with this game that I did not want to put it down. I clocked in around 20 to 25 hours in the game, which is definitely the most for the main story of a Sonic game. At least 70% of that playtime went towards exploration. I was having so much fun with this game that I ended up splitting my playtime between every island, which there are 4 of. I ended up 100%ing this game seamlessly and got the Platinum Trophy on PS5. For reference, there has only ever been one game that I got a Platinum Trophy prior to this, so make of that what you will. Sonic is literally the perfect series to put in an open world setting. This game does feature fast travel, but I only ever use it upon revisiting islands to get more collectibles. Sonic is just so fast in this game that running from one part of the map to the other side took less than 3 minutes with maxed out stats. Stuff like that makes this the perfect background game to just play with something else going on in the background. Much like Pokemon, this is the Sonic game I always wanted as a kid. Although the pop-in is horrendous and the floating platforms and rails are a turn-off to some, I always wanted a Sonic game where there weren't really levels, but just an open field with mini obstacles with objectives and shit. Obviously not what we got now, there are the cyberspace levels. The cyberspace levels function like traditional Sonic gameplay, with a point A to point B stage with platforming and junk. Many people agree that this is the worst part of the game, as levels themselves have pretty lazy level design. 1, because a good chunk of these are reused level designs from old games, and 2, they're just not good. The way the game controls caters more towards open level design, so when you put this into simple point A to point B stage, it doesn't really work. Especially with narrow paths and such. That being said, I still enjoyed some of these quite a bit. They offer a nice change of pace if you ever get tired of the normal game. It was also fun figuring out which levels were from which game. Especially this faithful recreation of Metal Harbor. That was a nice touch. Playing all the cyberspace levels would probably take around an hour alone, so it's not really a big deal. The game also features a combat system, something not technically new to the series, but it definitely has not been this fleshed out. The game features a small skill tree to unlock new skills to fight these mini-bosses around the map. The combat is nothing too crazy, but it can be fun at times. The enemies around the map, however, are pretty hit or miss, specifically the mini-bosses. Some of them were just not worth fighting to me, or had these very one-note gimmicks that were just not fun to me. Or in the Squid's case, the boss just took way too long for the point of the game I was at when I first fought it. The Supersonic boss fights are definitely a big highlight of the game. Sonic Team really said, hey, what if every boss fight was treated like the final boss and none of them disappoint, especially from a cinematic point of view?
Spoilers for Sonic Frontiers.
I know a lot of people don't really like the final boss, but I actually enjoyed it quite a bit. It doesn't play like a Sonic game, obviously, but the atmosphere and music is what makes it enjoyable for me. And finally, the fishing was fun and relaxing. Nothing crazy whatsoever, but the music was soothing and the fishing itself was pretty simple, so no complaints there. The story is a big talking point when it comes to fans of the series. I've never played Sonic for the plot, but I do enjoy some of the stories in the games, specifically Adventure 2. The plot itself in this game isn't anything too crazy, but my favorite part of the story are the character interactions. I know that for whatever reason, some Sonic fans had a problem with how the game goes about referencing older games. This game will randomly bring up past characters and events to pass as casual throwaway lines or to bring context to a scene. They don't really need to exist, but I thought they were a nice addition, and proof that Sega does care about their past games somewhat.
Kinda reminds me of where we found Babylon Garden. Yeah, I wonder what Jet's up to.
This was also supposed to be an anniversary title as well, so I don't mind at all. My only gripe was this part on the 4th island. It's just there for story purposes. Sonic throughout the whole game is being corrupted with cyberspace energy or some shit. This reaches its climax during this island. I thought there was going to be a very cool section where you play as the other characters to find a way to save them. Or at least a more meaningful way. But they kind of just resolve it with the power of friendship, essentially. Kind of lame. Also, the last island is just a rehash of the first island, but that didn't bother me too much. My favorite part of the plot, though, was definitely the dynamic between Eggman and his daughter, Sage. Sage was just an AI that Eggman created for his plans. He did have a lot of faith for her, though, even believing she might be his greatest creation. She keeps him safe in cyberspace by protecting him from threats. They form a father-daughter-like bond, and it makes the ending act of the game all the more upsetting. Mike Pollock's delivery as Eggman in this scene caught me off guard, as I didn't think the emotion from Dr. Roll fat could exist in a Sonic game.
I understand. Go. Fulfill your function.
The voice direction in this game, in general, is pretty solid. Every line in this game seems legit and genuine, as if the characters are actually talking to each other and not just voice actors reading off a script, if that makes any sense. Overall, I'm excited to see what the future holds in store for this series. In 2023, we'll be getting a free content update with the 2 main features being new playable characters and a new story. Tails, Knuckles, and Amy have not been playable in 3D for so fucking long, I can't wait. Frontiers laid down the groundwork for future entries in the series. Hopefully Sonic Team and Sega can go 2 games without fucking up. Sonic fans have been eating for the past year or so hopefully we can ride this high just a bit longer. So, it's time for the hardest decision I had to make throughout this entire video. When I started scripting this video, I basically had every entry locked in. Every entry except what would be number 1, and by proxy, what would be number 2. The number 1 and 2 on this list were so fucking close. Like, ridiculously close. But I had to make a decision. And what made number 2 was leaning into making the number 1 spot for so long. But I came to a conclusion that I will elaborate on later. Number 2 is the last game on this list not released in 2022, so it's an older one. Alright, I'm gonna bite the bullet. Some of you have probably never heard of this game. Tales of Vesperia is a video game by Bandai Namco released in 2008 for the Xbox 360. An extended port of the game was released for the PS3 a year later, adding more content. Finally, another enhanced port titled Tales of Vesperia Definitive Edition released in 2019 for basically every console. For those who don't know, the Tales series of games is a franchise of JRPGs with very unique combat compared to others in the same genre. It features what is dubbed the linear motion battle system. Just know that the combat is more action-oriented and happens in real time. With a bunch of skills and moves learned along the way, you can do some crazy shit with combos and such. Just want to say that I am not the best at combat in this game, but I can still have lots of fun with it. The combos in this game can be insane if you know what you're doing, like borderline fighting game RPG. Let the record show that at this point in time I have only played 2 Tales games, Tales of Symphonia and Tales of Vesperia. The former I haven't even come close to beating, yet I still consider myself a fan. So with only 1 game fully completed under my belt, I can for sure say that I am not knowledgeable when it comes to the series as a whole. Which means going forward I can only attribute my experiences with this game to, well, my experiences with this game, as no substantial progress was made when I initially played Symphonia back in like 2014. With all that being said, let's actually talk about the game now, because I have a lot to say. Right off the bat, with this whole project I did, I logged the start and ending of every game I played. I just want to point out that I started playing this game back in January 6th to be exact. As for completion, I beat this game on December 12th. As of writing this portion of the script, that was yesterday. This game is massive. Now that doesn't mean I was playing this game every day until beating it. I just took some breaks to do other stuff. Not that this game is boring, not at all. I just wanted to do everything this game had to offer, and some of it did take a long time. The game stars protagonist Yuri Lolo, who is without a doubt my favorite protagonist in any game ever. Just as a basic summary, he's sarcastic and cynical, but still cares for people. Doesn't sound too incredible, but we'll get to that more later. He keeps his same mindset and morals from when the game begins to the very end. Every other character in the game goes through some sort of development, which most of the time involves Yuri in some way. Yuri is very comfortable with how he is, and thus helps the others grow and develop in their own way. There's Rapide, Yuri's dog and sidekick, who at first glance is just a dog with a badass design. But after watching the prequel movie made for this game, Tales of Vesperia, The First Strike, I can appreciate him a lot more, even though at the end of the day, he's a dog. Estelise, or just Estelle, is a noble woman who is sheltered in a castle her whole life. The game has many instances of her gaining real-world experiences, with her having to make many important decisions throughout the game. Karel Capel is a young boy with a lot of insight on how guilds work and the culture surrounding them. But due to being a coward, he gets pushed around by a lot of the other guilds and the people in them. It may not look like it when looking at the main cast, but Karel probably goes through the most character development out of the whole cast, and that's thanks to Yuri being such a great big brother figure towards him. That's the main thing I love about this game. The cast is incredible. They bounce off each other perfectly, and each character is very likable in their own way. The writing in this game is some of the best I've seen in a JRPG. There is some corny shit in there, like the obligatory bathhouse scene, but like Sonic Frontiers, the dialogue seems real. This is how these people would talk to each other in a real setting, and it stays consistent throughout the whole game. Rita Mordio is a researcher who works and is obsessed with Blastia, these magical devices that are part of the society in this world. She also gives off big hater energy, so, it's pretty cool. It's like an A in my book. Raven is an old man who isn't actually that old. He's also pretty perverted at times, so you know he's the best character in the game. Okay, unironically, he is one of the best characters in the game. You would have to play the game to find out, I promise. Judith is from a race of these blue-haired elf people. She's a dragon rider and has a flying whale partner named Baul. She's probably the most level-headed out of all the characters in the game, and she can be pretty sassy at many points during the game. Patty is actually a new character that wasn't in the original 360 release of the game. She was added to the PS3 version, and she's a pirate whose whole story arc revolves around finding the lost treasure of the fabled pirate Ifrid. Ifrid is also kind of a Cid Final Fantasy situation where every Final Fantasy has a Cid. Most Tales games have an Ifrid. But yeah, Patty talks in a lot of pirate talk, and honestly, it can seem pretty obvious at times that she's kind of tacked onto the original game. I'm not sure if she was supposed to be in the original, but was cut out at some point in development, but nonetheless, her character makes a fine addition to the cast in my opinion. And she does come with extra content like bosses and such, so that's nice. And finally, Flynn Sypho, who was Yuri's childhood best friend and rival. Much like Patty, he's an addition to the party in newer versions of the game, however, is still in the original as a prevalent character, and he even plays a major role in the prequel movie. He is part of the Imperial Knights and wants what's best for the Empire. He's also the antithesis to Yuri when it comes to morals and such. Speaking of morals, let's talk about what is probably the most iconic scene when it comes to fans of this game, and where most people decided that this game is the shit.
Spoilers for Tales of Vesperia.
Yuri is basically a vigilante. He will take matters into his own hands if he feels as if it's the right thing to do. There are a few important figureheads in the story that are some scummy fucks, and Yuri is not having it. Knowing that the laws will not punish these people, Yuri decides he'll be the one to punish them by just killing them. I can't think of many games where the main character just says fuck it and takes out the trash himself. This is where Yuri and Flynn bounce off each other perfectly, as Flynn is loyal to the laws of the world, whereas Yuri believes his actions are necessary to create a better environment. He's willing to dirty his own hands and reputation to make the world better for everyone else. Like he's just a goat, man. I don't know what else to say.
I recognize it for what it is, and I've made my choices. Murder is a crime.
And even knowing that, you intend to dirty your hands.
Intend to? I already have.
Even though this game basically took me a year to complete, I tried my best to do as much content as possible. There were a lot of games where my main goal was to just beat the game, like Final Fantasy XIV. But the world in this game was so interesting to me that I wanted to see what all the side content was. And there is a lot! Maybe a little too much, but it's optional, so whatever. You actively have to go out of your way to get these side quests going, which could be a good or bad thing depending on who you are. However, there is one piece of optional content that got on my nerves so much, it probably cost the game the #1 spot. I'll refrain from spoiling anything major during this segment because I really want to rant about this, and hey, if you decide to play this game in the future, this will actually help you, trust me. So throughout the game, you'll maybe come across these weapons for your party known as the Fel Arms. In combat, these weapons' power increase based on how many enemies you've killed in your playthrough. I thought nothing of these really, as I thought collecting them would just lead to an extra side quest at the end of the game or something. They don't unlock a quest, but they do unlock an extra phase to the final boss. I was still pretty excited to see it, as it seems like a pretty cool reward. That was until I saw that the fucker was level 82! Near the end of the game, I was around level 58 or so, and I did some side quests and some other side content before heading towards the end game, as I wanted to get a few more things done. So when I started the final boss, I was around level 64. Not bad. Too bad I couldn't even get good damage off on the bastard because of this game's corny shield mechanic that some enemies have, and the fact that this dickhead has a move where he just heals a fuck ton of health. It was like 4 AM at this point, and I wanted to have this game done that night. Had I known collecting the Fel Arms would unlock this, I probably wouldn't have collected them. Now, if you meet specific requirements while fighting the final boss, you get a weapon that may help you, but this is only present in the original version of the game. And I was playing the Definitive Edition. Nice, nice. Now, this isn't the first time I was put into a situation like this. In Final Fantasy VII, I also started fighting the final boss in the middle of the night. I got my shit rocked and discovered that there was a summon in the game that had big dick damage and would help me immensely against the final boss. Since I liked the game so much, this didn't bother me at all, and I grinded the fuck out of the game to get what I wanted. It was a success, and I ended up shitting on Sephiroth. In this game, there was literally nothing I could do at this point but grind like 12 levels, which I couldn't find any super good grinding spots that would be less than like 5 hours. I would have to sink major time into grinding for this stupid boss I didn't even want to fight in the first place. So I did the most pussy shit imaginable in a situation like this, and I just switched the difficulty to easy. I know, bitch made, but I was not having it. The final boss was cake, and low-key, I'm kinda glad I did that. Because for a game that likes putting a lot of context into its scenes, lore, and story, the ending was kinda not worth it. It wasn't bad, but it was kinda just abrupt and didn't really feel like it had a lot of staying power. That's all I'll say for now. But when the credits started rolling, god damn. Has there ever been a game or piece of media that you were so attached to that when it was finally over, you kinda just didn't know what to do? Like, I've been playing this game since the beginning of the year, and seeing all this amazing artwork of the characters I got to know, to this more mellow version of the game's main theme had me feeling a certain way. Now, I didn't cry or anything. That's like the most pussy shit I would ever cry during a game. I wanted more out of this world, so I ended up watching the previously mentioned prequel movie, which was alright. It could have done more as an adaptation, but it just wanted to tell the story of what Yuri and Flynn were doing before the events of the game, and it served its purpose well. I know the game and some of its characters are featured in the Project Cross Zone series, so I'll have to check that out soon. But man, what a wild ride. Even though the ending portion of the game left a sour taste in my mouth, this game is still fantastic, and is probably my #1 recommendation for everyone who's watching this to play. Even if you're not a fan of JRPGs, I'm sure there's something in this game that you will find yourself enjoying a lot. Next year, I finally intend on completing Symphonia, a game I have been wanting to beat for a while. Maybe it'll be on next year's list. There are some honorable mentions I want to go over quickly, so let's get those out of the way before I reveal #1, which I'm sure most of you figured out already. First up for the honorable mentions, it's Link's Awakening DX. Not the remake, but the enhanced version of the game for Game Boy Color. The game was a pretty fun 2D Zelda, however losing track of where you are and where to go was kind of annoying, but it's a Game Boy game so I can't really blame them. And Koholint Island and its characters were pretty enjoyable. I have played Fall Guys before when it first came out, but this year it became free to play, so me and my friends hopped on and this became our main multiplayer game to fuck around on before Multiverses and Overwatch were a thing. This game still holds up really well, and I'm sure I'll catch myself on this game again in the near future. This year I made the very intelligent decision to purchase a PS5. It was mostly because my PS4 seemed to be on its last leg, so I pretty much just wanted an upgrade. Astro's Playroom is probably one of the best pack-in games for a console. It was a simple, fun platformer that shows you what the PS5 is capable of. It shows you how the loading is barely existent and how the controller functions. My favorite part was obviously the reference to numerous PlayStation IPs and games, as I've been playing PlayStation alongside Nintendo basically my whole life. I even own all the home console PlayStations. Torna the Golden Country was an extra DLC story for Xenoblade 2 that functions as a prequel. Overall, I thought the game was decent. For sure overhyped, as a lot of Xenoblade fans claim that if this was its own fully fledged game, it would be the best in the series, bar none. I don't doubt that, but the combat just felt really repetitive to me, and I just liked Xenoblade 2's combat better, in all honesty. The story was really good as usual for this series, with some moments that had me shocked, for sure. Majora's Mask is one of my favorite games of all time, which is why it didn't make the list, as I played this game numerous times before. It was just definitely the most standout of all the games I replayed this year, so I thought I would mention it. And finally, Mario Kart 8. The DLC, to be specific. Sucks that we still haven't gotten a new Mario Kart in almost 10 years, but this is better than nothing. To be blunt, Wave 1 was some booty cheeks, and they seem to be picking up the slack with the 2 most recent waves. Maple Treeway and 3DS Rainbow Road being my 2 favorite tracks in the series, so that helps. Okay, it's time for #1. So, this video is long as shit, so I'm just gonna assume some of you guys forgot what was on the thumbnail. Xenoblade 3 is nothing short of amazing, as anybody who has played it knows. It does so much good and very little bad. The Xenoblade series was the first group of games I got into post-high school. Xenoblade 1 has what is probably my favorite story in a game. Xenoblade 2 had some of the most complex but interesting combat in a game. And Xenoblade 3 has a nice mix of both, as that's what the game seeks out to do. Take fans of the series, or even just fans of one of the aforementioned games, and hook them in with a game that most people can enjoy. I've seen people who only like 1 and hate 2, and vice versa, who all love this game. It was a toss-up between this game and Vesperia for the #1 spot. I think Tales of Vesperia is a more consistent game when it comes to gameplay and all that, but what Xenoblade 3 does well, it does really damn well. Both games are pretty close to perfection in my opinion, but not quite there. I'm not going to go too deep into the story as a whole as it's pretty complicated, but I will touch on specific moments later on with a spoiler warning of course. Just know that there are two nations both representing the worlds explored in the two past entries. This game has a lot of callbacks to the previous games in the series, but also a game you can enjoy standalone. Probably better to play 1 and 2 first though in my opinion. The gameplay loop can be pretty repetitive at times, but just like games before it, most of the stuff in this game is optional and the game isn't really all that challenging, so you can manage pretty well without grinding or doing side quests. I like how your main party is pretty much there from the beginning of the game, so you can see most of the characters grow from beginning to end. Noah was honestly pretty lame during the beginning of the game. He was pretty boring and his only personality trait upon first impression was just him questioning the nature of the war and why he's even part of it in the first place. We'll touch on him some more later as he does get better with time. Mio is where the game is really strong with its messages and themes. To explain this as simply as possible, there are these marks that the characters have all somewhere on their body that determine when they'll die or expire. Of the main cast, Mio has the shortest amount of time to live, being 3 months, as she's the oldest. This is where the game's main theme in my opinion is shown. Time. The characters are on a clock. Almost literally. They're on a time limit both figuratively and literally. You gotta make the best out of the present. Life is something that should be treasured and you should make the best of it before time is up. Throughout the game, Mio doesn't really seem to know how to handle her situation, but she mostly just doesn't want the others to worry among other things. Noah and Mio are the two main protagonists in this game, so they seemingly go through the most development throughout the game. Uni is another character that radiates big hater energy. So obviously she's my favorite. She has a sharp tongue and isn't afraid to let others know how she feels. Uni goes through a pretty good arc during this game's events, but it's pretty hard to talk about it without spoiling it, so you'll have to see for yourself. Taion is the smartass of the group who comes up with most of the plans that the group makes in this game, and typically has good judgment. Due to events in his past, he's become a more cautious person as he wants to keep his comrades safe. So this dude's name is literally Taion, and looks like this. Kinda weird. Jokes aside though, I never really felt like I needed this type of black character representation until now. I could definitely see this character in a game blowing my mind as a kid and helping me realize that black representation is important. Anyways, he and Uni serve as the main healers in the group and get the job done pretty well. Also, Lance. He's pretty much the antithesis to Taion as he is pretty reckless and is kind of a meathead. He also has some issues with stuff in the past, but uniquely to the other members of the cast, instead of dwelling on it, he decides to move past it instead of facing it. He's ready to put his life on the line to keep his friends safe, as a tank like him would naturally do. Finally, we have Senna, who is probably the weakest in terms of character and progression. She has a sisterly bond with Mio, whom she looks up to. She brings a nice, cheerful, and energetic energy to the main cast, in a game that I feel like doesn't have as many lighthearted moments as the previous 2 entries. Her whole thing is that she lacks confidence and doesn't really have her own identity compared to the rest of the cast, especially Mio. Everybody gets their own character arc and development throughout the game, except Senna, despite what the game would like for you to believe. This sucks as Senna is genuinely one of my favorite characters in the game. I know many find her annoying and kind of irrelevant, but again, she brings an energy to this game that I feel is necessary to balance out how truly dark this game can be at times. Other party members are designated to the Heroes mechanic, characters that appear throughout the game that can be added to your party as a 7th member. This is where most of the side content resides, as each of these characters have their own quests that go over their own respective stories. The characters themselves are pretty interesting in their own right, but most of the quests themselves didn't really interest me all that much. They're just glorified side quests basically. Speaking of which, the Xenoblade series is pretty notorious for having a fuck ton of side quests to do, many of which being inconsequential, which this game is no different. My rule of thumb is that I will do any side quest that I find throughout the game, but I won't go out of my way to look for them as most of them are only done for XP. Something this game provides plenty of even without these quests. By the end of the game I just ended up skipping the dialogue for these as it just amounted to anime filler plots basically. Which is kind of the point of side quests, but I don't care. However, there was one side quest I had problems with, akin to my problems with the end of Tales of Vesperia. Near the beginning of the game, you get a side quest where you must visit various Nopon caravans to register them. The quest spans the whole game, and before I made it to the final boss, I want to finally complete it. Except I didn't, because the game wouldn't let me. I don't know if I missed a point in the game where I needed to do something, or if the game was just bugged, but I just couldn't do it. So, that was awesome. Fuck side quests, man. This game features so many mechanics to the combat that I personally don't want to get into the specifics due to there being so much. I like how the cooldown / timing for moves change depending on which class you are playing as. One type relating mostly to Xenoblade 1, one relating to 2. Speaking of which, you can change any of your main party members' classes to other party members. You want someone to be a healer instead of a tank? You can do that, and vice versa. And this is where the heroes come in, as you can turn any of your characters into their classes as well. To keep it real, I just swapped who was playing what role throughout the game. I didn't care too much about who was doing what, as long as I could do the bare minimum of that job. There were a few moments where I switched classes according to what I needed. Like I said, the game is fairly easy, so it didn't matter too much. There's also the Ouroboros system. Very early on, you'll see that the pairings of the characters will be able to fuse to these forms that allow you to change the pace of battle quickly. They have their own sets of skills, followed by a skill tree that can assume different forms depending on which character initiates the transformation. My favorite is Yunie's, of course, as I actually like having control over healing for once, since, as usual, the AI sucks at its job. Finally, there's the classic chain attack system, which allows you to make or break most fights. Honest to God, I didn't know how this system fully worked until right before the final area of the game. Won't get too into it because it's pretty complicated at first, but basically just stack moves and combos to have the biggest damage multiplier you can. There is a little RNG to it, but most of the time it didn't matter too much to me. Only annoying part is that the chain attack music interrupts whatever normal song is playing at the moment. It's a banger, so I didn't mind too much. It only really bothered me during boss fights. And of course the music in this game is godlike. Apparently the developers straight up made their own flutes for this game to make the music more unique, which is incredible. Definitely my favorite soundtrack out of all the games on this list. Other quick things I can bring up before I spoil the fuck out of all of you. The villains. Mobius. They did their job right as villains, as they are some real fuckers, but aside from that, they're really just kinda generic, especially in comparison to the past entries. Much like Kirby, this game looks amazing, especially for the hardware it's on. It seems Monolith Soft found a cool way to incorporate the anime-esque art style of Xenoblade 2 and the more realistic art style of Xenoblade 1. This game also handles tutorials perfectly, something the last game really struggled with. If there's something in the game you don't understand, then there's more than likely a hand-holding tutorial within the game's options that'll help you out. I think that's it for my main talking points, so here is why this game took the #1 spot. Spoilers, obviously. This game has 7 chapters, and honestly the first half of the game was just fine. I thought it was good and seemed like the go-to Xenoblade game if you had to play one, but nothing insane. That was up until Chapter 5. A series of events led up to the group being trapped in prison. Since the group is obviously on a time limit, this leads to the villains purposely letting Mio's lifespan go to waste as to taunt the main characters and especially Noah. Up until this point, Noah was kind of just a generic JRPG protagonist. But this scene shows how determined Noah is to save Mio, and there's obviously a relationship forming between the two, and that's what gave Noah the determination in the first place. Watching the main cast being able to do nothing, yet still trying, was heartbreaking. This session was done so perfectly as the expressions coming from all characters are so relatable. Like I said, time is the main theme of the game, but in this scene, nothing can be done. You just have to sit there and watch these characters wait while nothing can be done. It's going to waste. Mio herself wasn't amazingly interesting either towards the beginning of the game, but here is where she finally accepts the cycle of life and death and comes to terms with the situation at hand. She didn't know at first whether she wanted to live or die. She didn't really seem to care, but here is where she finally makes a decision, and here is where I finally break.
If I were given the chance, if this road I've walked were to keep on going, I'd like to spend that time with my Noah.
The way this entire scene played out already had me emotional, but this is what did it. This is probably the only moment in a game that has ever made me cry. I wasn't sobbing or bawling my eyes out or whatever, but it was more of a smiling cry. Like, god damn, this game is good! The chapter ends with how you'd probably expect it, but I want to talk about how well the ending to the game is done. This is by far my favorite ending to any game, off the top of my head. Both sides are going back to how they were before, with the game itself taking place in a mix of both Xenoblade 1 and Xenoblade 2's worlds. Every pairing between both worlds having to say goodbye was also done so perfectly. Lan Senna, Yunie Taion, and Mia Noah. Oh, and Riku Manana, of course. We also get the infamous scene where we see Melia from Xenoblade 1 still having Shulk's Monado, and Nia from Xenoblade 2 letting Poppy out of some pod thing, and then looking at a picture from the cast of Xenoblade 2. And yes, Rex is a pimp, we've been new. The music on top of the visuals of each group running endlessly was also done so well. I didn't cry during this part, but damn did I want to. I was so happy to see the message not being just to simply keep moving forward, as that's so overdone and such an easy message they could have made. It's about how every day is a new day and you have to make the most out of it. There's so much more to life than what's at face value. The decision is up to you and yours alone. You may fuck up here and there, but there's so much life to live. So live it to the fullest. At least that's how I interpreted it. When I look back on it, this game didn't seem all that special to me at first. But looking back on it, the game had a ton of good themes and messages. I just can't not see this as the best Xenoblade game. This game isn't the best when it comes to gameplay, and I won't lie, I was kind of bored at moments, but that's how the Xenoblade series has always been to me. The storytelling is just so immaculate that no matter how good or bad these games may seem to some, I'm gonna finish it no matter what. I recommend this series to everyone just for the story alone. I'm not the biggest fan of the series as some others are, but I can't deny the quality at all. And these games are really good examples of pieces of media you should really experience yourself and to not let the internet make that decision for you. And that goes for a lot of games on this list. So that was my longest shit video with multiple mini video essays. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you made it this far, just know I appreciate the fuck out of you. I know this video wasn't groundbreaking at all, but YouTube was always something I aspired to do since I was like 9 or 10. So hopefully next year I can get some more shit done in that regard. Playing all these games this year was actually a really fun experience, and I plan on doing it again next year. Maybe less than 50 and 60, that way I can actually, have a life. I'd be glad to talk with people about some of these games, or even other games I played this year. In the description you'll find my backlogged account where I keep track of all these games and much more. As well as my Twitter and Discord where you can reach out and maybe we could have a chat about these games. There were also a good amount of games I haven't finished that I'm sure would have made this list, like Fire Emblem Path of Radiance and Danganronpa. So who knows? Maybe they'll make it onto next year's list. Anyways, thank you so much for watching, and I'll be back hopefully soon with another video. Peace, everybody.